Hello students, I hope you are now familiar with the subject matter of sociology and the basic concepts of sociology which we have dealt in the last class. In the last class I said that sociology studies society and social behavior. We also studied that sociology studies social behavior in a scientific manner and therefore, sociology could be called as a science. At this point, there is a need to answer few questions. Why do we call sociology a science and how could we call it a scientific study? There are number of approaches and methods that are adopted by sociologists to study sociological phenomenon scientifically. The subject matter of sociology is society, which is very complex and enormous, and therefore, we cannot have a single method or a single approach to study it scientifically. Different sociologists have developed different methods and different approaches, which we are going to learn in this class. The content of today's class are historical method, comparative methods, functionalism, formal sociology, structuralism, inverse deductive method, the experimental method, the social survey method, the case study method. According to Chapin, there are three main methods, namely historical method, statistical methods, fieldwork observation. Elwood suggests 5 methods in sociology. He says that comparative method is an important method in sociology and it also adopts historical method, survey method, deductive method and philosophical method. According to Hart, there are again 5 more methods. They are common sense method, historical method, observation method, experimental method and statistical method. As you know, T.B. Bottomore, who is a famous sociologist, explains 5 approaches. He says that historical sociology, comparative methods, functionalism, formal sociology and structuralism are the important methods that are adopted in sociology. Of course, we have lots of classifications on the approaches and methods of sociology, but in this class we are going to learn about few common methods that are adopted in most of the sociological studies. First, we will study the historical method. Historical method refers to the study of events, processes and civilizations. It tries to find out the origin of processes and events. The aim of historical sociology is not just finding out the origin of a completed process. Actually, it aims to apply the causes, the consequences and the events that had happened in earlier society to be applied to the contemporary society, so that the present society could be understood in a better fashion. This is the aim of historical sociology. Historical sociology is influenced by 2 important disciplines. One is philosophy of history and the other one is biological theory of evolution. Philosophy of history again studies the problem of origin, development, transformation of social institutions and also civilizations. Max Weber has adopted historical sociology in his work. He explained how the work culture of Protestants has resulted in profit and reinvestment, and this situation has created capitalism. So, he tried to say how the spirit of Protestant ethics has resulted in capitalism. The second one is biological theory of evolution. This biological theory of evolution was mostly explained by Comte, Spencer and Hobbes. This biological theory tried to trace the development of society from its origin. Actually, the biological theory has its root in the evolution of Darwin. The Darwin's theory of evolution was very much appreciated in those periods, and sociologists also wanted to adopt it and apply it to sociological studies. So, while doing that, the sociologists like Comte and Spencer said that society has evolved from a homogeneous simple one to a complex social order. For this, we can take very simple societies like agricultural society or a tribal society, which is not very much differentiated. These societies are very simple. All the people in that society are similar. They adopted the same culture, spoke the same language, had the same kind of food, and therefore, the whole society was so simple. As time passes, these agricultural societies transformed into industrial societies. When we talk about industrial society, it is not a homogeneous one. It becomes very complex. There is lot of differentiation and there is division of labor. People are identified by different kinds of identity. So, this is what they meant by transformation from a simple homogeneous social life to a complex heterogeneous social life. The next method we have to study is comparative method. In sociology, making comparison between two institutions or two phenomenon or even two culture, sometimes even the whole society as a single unit is possible. Why do we make comparison in sociological studies? It is because in social research, bringing out a definite causal relationship is not possible, and therefore, sociologists try to bring out the similarities and differences between two social institutions or two cultures, and therefore, they could derive the similarities and differences to study a particular culture. According to Durkheim, direct experiment to find out causal relationships is not possible in sociology, and therefore, comparative methods could be employed to understand social phenomenon. After saying this, Durkheim studied suicide by adopting comparative methods. He was able to distinguish between three types of suicides, that is anomic suicide, egoistic suicide and altruistic suicide by their own qualities, and we could make a comparison between these types and derive something sociologically. We could talk about two more sociologists, Lipset and Bendix, who also adopted comparative method to study social mobility in different industrial societies. They studied how different occupational groups could change their background and progress in their own social life. The next important method is functionalism. The idea was formulated in 19th century, and We have two important anthropologists, namely Malinowski and Ratcliffe Brown, who studied tribal societies to explain functionalism. Malinowski studied Trobriand islanders, and he said that each practice in their social life has a specific function to perform. For example, Trobriand islanders used to practice magic in every aspect of their life. For an outsider, a magic may be something like a magic, it has no other meaning than magic. But for Trobriand islanders, magic has a specific function. Even while they go for fishing, which is their important economic activity, they perform magic in order to call the gods to protect them. Functionalism says that any wisdom observed by the tribal, religious and social has a specific function. Durkheim explained division of labor in society by using functionalism. Durkheim says that in modern societies there is broader division of labor. He says that each subsystem in the society has a specific function to perform, like our human body. Our eyes have a specific function, whereas our arms are meant for a different kind of function. Our legs are meant for another kind of function, but the motive is to make the body function properly. Similarly, the society which has several subsystems functions properly because each subsystem performs its own function properly. The next one is formal sociology. Formal sociology is primarily an approach developed by Germans. This is primarily a German way of looking at social issues. George Simmel states that sociology adopts a new method to study social relationships that were not followed by traditional social sciences. Sociology is concerned with different forms of social interactions that take place in social life. Normally, we have two levels of institutions in our society. One is macro level institution and the other one is micro level social institutions. Under macro level, we have the state and economic system. Under state and economic subsystem also, some kind of interaction take place. These interactions are the focus point of other social sciences. We have the micro level institutions like family and community, and the kind of interaction that takes place in family and community are the interest of formal sociology. Just by looking at, we may feel that macro level institutions are very important, while micro level social institutions are not that much important. But formal sociology says that the kind of interaction that takes place in family and community is very, very important, and it has some influence on the macro level institutions also. The next important method is structuralism. Structuralism is mostly adopted by social anthropologists. Claude Lévi-Strauss, an anthropologist, studied the logic underlying the customary practices of tribal people. He studied kinship, prohibitions, incest taboo, prescriptions of marriage in terms of structuralism. In the approach of structural functionalism, we try to interpret all the parts in the society only in terms of its function. We have a number of parts in our society. When we say parts, we refer to the subsystems. Each subsystem has a definite function to perform, and all the parts, that is all the subsystems, have a definite function. At the same time, they are interdependent also. But at the end of it, The main aim of all these subsystems is to contribute to the total functioning of the society. For example, we have educational subsystem, we have the economic subsystem, we also have the political subsystem. Just by looking at it, we feel that each system is functioning on its own, but actually it is not so. The educational system has to depend on the economic system. The economic system in turn has to depend on the political system of the society. But the main aim is to make the whole society, the entire society, to function properly. So, this is what is the aim of structuralism. It will not distinguish paths and study, but it will make a holistic study of society. The next important method is inverse deductive method. There are two lines of reasoning in any scientific inquiry. They are deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. The use of logical reasoning is to identify or deduce more specific patterns from broad general ideas or theories of human social behavior. It is known as deductive reasoning. There are many sociological theories on human behavior. When sociologists try to apply these theories to justify a specific behavior, it can be termed as deductive method. For example, when juvenile delinquency or divorce is studied in sociology, the sociologists try to apply disorganization theory in order to explain delinquency or divorce, because these theories have lot of information regarding disorganization and how it leads to different problems in the society. Inductive reasoning refers to developing a theory to explain specific facts. That is, it begins with the collection of facts or evidences of a specific phenomenon and tries to evolve a theory. For example, the theory of suicide is a form of inductive reasoning. I have explained two methods, that is deductive and inductive methods in sociology, but sociology cannot make use of either inductive method or deductive method fully. Sociology has to make a combination of inductive method and deductive method, and that methodology is called inverse deductive method. Actually, in inverse deductive method, the sociologists try to bring out evidences and make a sequence of findings by comparing different social phenomena. For example, urbanization and industrialization, and also when sociologists try to bring a correlation between urbanization and disintegration of family. While making a study on these aspects, sociologists try to bring out several factors that underlie urbanization, industrialization and disorganization of family, and make a correlation between all these things and come to a conclusion, and this method is called inverse deductive method. Another interesting method in sociological studies is the experimental method. Conducting experiment in sociological studies is very difficult, but still sociologists have tried to study social issues experimentally. The experimental method consists of observing, recording, classifying, framing hypothesis, then verification and at last prediction. In experimental method, the whole group, that is the sample, is divided into two groups. One is experimental group and the other one is control group. The researcher tries to apply an experimental variable on the experimental group and tries to study the phenomenon that he wants to study. At the end of the study, the researcher tries to compare the control group and the experimental group, and he tries to explain a particular phenomenon. As we know it, we cannot conduct experiment in society as we do it in the laboratory situation, but sociologists are trying very hard to develop their own methods to conduct experiment in societies, either in its natural setting or under laboratory situation. An important and also very old method adopted by sociologists to study society is observation method. Observation method consists of observing an event systematically. Even before starting this method, the researcher has to decide what actually he is going to observe, how he is going to observe the matter, and how he is going to record the event. And therefore, systematic and also planning the observation method is very, very important. There are two types of observation methods. One is participant observation and the other one is non-participant observation. In participant observation, the researcher himself participates in the event and records the events and studies it. For example, when a researcher wants to study the marriage function or a religious function, he could participate in the event itself and record it. This is called participant observation. But there are certain social events which cannot be studied by participating in it. Under such circumstances, we adopt non-participant observation. For instance, when a sociologist wants to study the communal riots, he just cannot go into the riot situation and record it, and therefore, he can stand apart and do the recording and finally study the event. This is called non-participant observation. What is very much required in observation method is studying it systematically and recording it properly. A widely used method in sociology is social survey method. Social survey method is normally used to study the living conditions of the people and also the existing social conditions and social issues. In social survey method, the most important thing is the data is collected over a vast or a huge population in a particular area. In social survey method, the government or any body that wants to study the social conditions at a particular time has to make a study immediately, very quickly, and also come out with the data. Normally, when the government wants to introduce some welfare schemes, it adopts social survey method. It employs investigators and asks them to collect information on a huge population at a particular area. On the basis of the data collected, it introduces welfare schemes and also policies. For example, tsunami, when the government wants to introduce some program for the victims, then it has to make a quick study of the condition that exists in tsunami hit areas, and therefore, it sends people there and they have to collect the data within a short period over a huge population and submit it to the government. On the basis of the data, the government will frame policies or welfare programs. Another example could be said that when the government wants to introduce some programs on maternal health, then a quick study has to be made on the primary health centers in the villages and the data has to be produced. Based on the data, the scheme will be introduced. So, whenever the government wants to introduce some programs, not only government or any body that wants to introduce schemes, then quick study has to be made, and on the basis of the information the schemes are introduced, and therefore, we can say that social survey method is a process by which quantitative facts are collected about the social aspects of the community. Another interesting method adopted in sociology is the case study method. Case study method involves purely qualitative analysis. Under case study method, the sociologist completely makes an observation of a person or a situation or an institution. He makes the selection of the person or the situation very carefully. It is not taking up a sample as wished by the researcher himself. He has to select the case very carefully, so that the case is highly representative of many other cases with similar qualities. For example, when we want to study the problems of the old age people, we collect lot of information and present the information with the help of tables and make interpretations on it. But the explanation is not complete, because the actual qualitative part of it is not presented by the researcher, because apart from the numbers, apart from the numerical explanation, we also need some qualitative explanation on that. In order to get this qualitative explanation, we have to present some cases. When we select the cases, we have to be very careful. We have to select the case, that is an old man with a specific problem, very carefully, so that he represents the whole population of the older people, and then make a case study. Under this case study, we bring out all the problems of the elderly man in all its dimensions. This is presented in a qualitative form, like a story, in a narrative form, so that when we read it, the entire problem of the older man is explained to the people. So, the case study method explains the social problem in a qualitative manner. Dear students, so far we have been discussing the methods and approaches adopted in sociology. The methods we have seen are historical method, comparative method, functionalism, formal sociology, structuralism, inverse deductive method, the experimental method, the observation method, the social survey method, the case study method. Now, I will pose some questions to you. What is observation method? Explain interview method. How does questionnaire method differ from interview method? Dear students, now I am sure that you understand the methods and approaches employed in sociological studies, and also you are convinced that sociology could be called as a science.